Ah, good evening. Hope your day's been well. What, you haven't joined me for my Victorian time travel series yet? No worries. Join me right now as we begin our journeys. We last left our Victorian townsfolk finishing up their breakfasts, tucking into porridge or bread and butter, and preparing to head out for their day's work or study. Now, as they did so, we heard the sounds of the city beginning to stir. But let us return to our stroll down the cobblestone streets for a bit more of the sights and sounds of Victorian England in the late morning and early afternoon hours. As you strolled down the street, you would notice the architectural variety of the neighborhood. Some houses might have been large and imposing, with high walls, gates, and maybe even a servant's entrance around back. Others will be modest terraced houses with shared courtyards and neat gardens out front. Passing by a bakery, you can smell the fresh loaves of bread being pulled from the oven, still warm and crusty. The air is sweet with the smell of sugar and spice wafting from a nearby cake shop. In the market square, fishmongers call out the day's catch, while butchers display their wares. A fruiterer calls out the arrival of his latest shipments of apples, oranges, and exotic fruits from far-off lands. Further on, a group of boys play a rousing game of marbles or football or soccer to our American friends. You might see some street vendors hawking their wares, a flower seller with a colorful array of blooms, a newspaper boy with the latest news, or a woman with baskets of freshly washed and dried laundry. If you're feeling charitable, you might give a penny or two to a beggar or someone selling matches. The tinkling of a nearby music hall drifts through open doorways, inviting you to step inside and enjoy a song or a dance. On the corner, a handsome milkman in his fine uniform delivers fresh milk to the doorstep. As you pass by a pub, you might hear the sound of laughter and conversation spilling out onto the sidewalk. Further on, you might spot a chemist advertising patent medicines that promise to cure all sorts of ailments, from coughs and colds to more serious maladies. You might also see a policeman directing traffic or keeping order. In the distance, the rumble of a train echoes as it steams toward its destination. And above it all, the midday sun shines brightly, casting long shadows on the bustling streets. If you've come from London, the air might be thick with soot, while the countryside offers cleaner air and views of rolling hills or babbling brooks. Perhaps you've done some shopping, and now you find yourself with a bundle of purchases, including some lovely ribbons and textiles from the haberdashery shop. Or maybe you're on your way to visit a friend, bringing a freshly baked loaf of bread or a plate of cookies from your mother's kitchen. Imagine the feel of the warm bread in your hands, the aroma of yeast and flour filling your senses. As you approach your friend's house, you might think about how good it will taste, spread with butter and jam. Now, while you walk, I want you to take a moment to really imagine the sensation of walking on these cobblestone roads. The sound of your shoes on the stones, the dust or mud caked on your ankles, the feel of the breeze on your skin, and the smells of the city all around you. The city in the distance, the open fields, the baking bread, the flowers from the flower girl, the chimney smoke. Take a deep breath and hold onto this feeling. Hold onto this moment. Because no matter where we go in our Victorian time travels, we'll always know what it feels like to simply walk around our neighborhood in the late morning hours of the Victorian age. I hope you enjoyed that little sensory break. So now that we're back, let's continue on. We may have noticed one of the most iconic symbols of the Victorian age as we walked through the streets. The old red double-decker buses, only they were called omnibuses then. Horse-drawn omnibuses rumbled along fixed routes, providing affordable transportation for the masses. The clatter of their hooves on the cobblestones was a familiar sound in Victorian cities. To ride the omnibus, you'd simply flag one down, pay the driver, and climb aboard. It was standing room only, and while the ride might be a bit bumpy, it was a convenient way to get around. You would have seen all sorts of people on board: working men, women out shopping, mothers with children, street vendors, and more. It was a microcosm of Victorian life unfolding before your eyes. Finally, let's talk about one of the defining features of Victorian cityscapes: the pubs. These establishments weren't just places to grab a quick drink, but social hubs where people gathered to relax, chat, and enjoy a pint of ale or cider. Entering a pub, you'd be greeted by the dim glow of gaslight, the murmur of conversation, and the clinking of glasses. The smell of beer and pipe tobacco would fill your senses as you took in the scene. Maybe you'd sit at a table and strike up a conversation with a new friend. Or maybe you'd stand at the bar and enjoy a pint while listening to the latest news. Pubs were a part of everyday life in the Victorian era and a window into the social customs and values of the time. And with that, we come to the end of our peaceful walk through a typical Victorian neighborhood in the late morning and early afternoon. We've experienced the sights, sounds, and smells of life in the Victorian era. From the bustle of the marketplace to the tranquility of an afternoon tea. The Victorian age was indeed an era of immense change and progress. But in the midst of all that, it was important to remember the little things, the simple pleasures of everyday life. The taste of fresh bread, the feel of the sun on your skin, the sound of laughter echoing in the streets. These were the moments that made life in the Victorian era, well, an everyday Victorian adventure. So now I want to ask you a question. If you could time travel to the Victorian era, what would you love to experience? Would you attend an afternoon tea party, visit a bustling market, or simply stroll through a neighborhood? Share your thoughts in the comments. During the Victorian era, the evening was a time when the hustle and bustle of the day wound down and families came together. It was a period of relaxation, connection, and preparation for the next day. Tonight, we're going to step back in time and explore what an evening in a typical Victorian home would have been like. We will look at how people spent their time, what they ate, and how they entertained themselves. You will also learn about some of the societal norms and expectations of the time. So let us turn our clocks back and see what an evening in a Victorian home was all about. It was common for families to begin their evenings with dinner, which was usually the largest meal of the day. For working-class families, meals might consist of basic ingredients like potatoes, cabbage, or bread and cheese. However, fancier cuts of meat, poultry, game, and fish would have been eaten by the middle and upper classes. Typical dishes included roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, plum pudding, and baked Alaska. These meals were often prepared by servants, allowing the family to relax and socialize during dinner. In addition to the food, table manners were important during the Victorian era. Children were expected to behave well and wait until everyone was served before eating. They were also taught to use a knife and fork properly and to chew with their mouths closed. The dining room was often the center of activity during the evening. After dinner, families would gather in the dining room to socialize, tell stories, and play games. For middle-class families with children, this was a time for homework and conversation. Parents would ask about their children's day at school while they did their homework. This also gave the children a chance to show off their knowledge and receive praise from their parents. For those without children, evenings were a time to catch up on reading or work. Some families would also invite friends over for a social evening, playing cards or dominoes. Board games were also popular, including backgammon, chess, and checkers. Music was another popular form of entertainment during the Victorian era. Families would often own a piano, and the women and children would play for their enjoyment. Singing was also popular, and families would often sing hymns or folk songs together. As the evening wore on, people would begin to prepare for bed. This often involved washing up, cleaning the house, and tidying the living room. For poorer families, this was a necessary task to keep their homes clean and orderly. For middle-class families, it was a way to show off their domestic skills. The evening was also a time for religious reflection. Many Victorians were devout Christians and would attend church services or prayer meetings in the evening. They would pray for guidance and comfort and to thank God for their blessings. This was especially true for families who had experienced loss or hardship during the day. For those unable to attend religious services, evening was a time for quiet reflection. They would read religious texts or pray on their own. They might also attend a Bible study group or a discussion group to talk about moral and spiritual issues. For some, evening was a time for creativity. Writing was a popular pastime during the Victorian era, and many people kept journals or wrote stories and poems. They would often write about their experiences during the day or about imaginary situations. This was a great way to express oneself and to escape the everyday world. Some families enjoyed attending public events during the evening, such as theater, concerts, and lectures. These events provided a welcome distraction from the routine of everyday life and gave people a chance to experience something new and exciting. Theater was especially popular, and families would often attend performances together. They would dress up and go to the local theater to watch plays, musicals, or operas. This was a great way to bond as a family and to enjoy a shared experience. Other forms of entertainment included attending a dance or social event. These events were a chance for young people to meet and socialize with others in their community. They would dance, play games, and chat, and it was a great way to find a potential partner. For those looking to marry, evenings were also a time for personal reflection. People would often take long walks alone or with their families to reflect on the day's events and to plan for the future. They would discuss their goals and dreams and make plans to achieve them. This was a great way to clear one's mind and to gain perspective on the challenges of the day. Lighting was an important aspect of evening life during the Victorian era. Gas lighting was becoming more widespread during this time, and it provided a much safer and more effective way to illuminate a home than candles or oil lamps. However, not all families had access to gas lighting, and those who did often had to be careful with their usage due to the high cost. Those without gas lighting relied on candles or oil lamps to provide light for their homes. This made it difficult to see and required families to be careful with their surroundings to prevent fires. Another important aspect of evening life during the Victorian era was the role of family. During this time, families were much larger than they are today and often consisted of multiple generations living together. This meant that evenings were often filled with activity as family members worked together to complete tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and child rearing. This also provided a sense of community and support for families during difficult times. Overall, evenings during the Victorian era were filled with a variety of activities, from dinner and socializing to religious reflection and entertainment. There was something for everyone to enjoy. While life during the Victorian era was challenging in many ways, the evening brought a sense of relaxation and normalcy to families. Whether they were celebrating a special occasion or simply enjoying the company of their loved ones, the evening was a time for people to unwind and connect with each other. The Victorian era was a time of great change and upheaval. The Industrial Revolution was transforming the way people lived and worked, and new technologies were emerging that were changing the world as people knew it. Despite these changes, the evening remained a constant. It was a time for families to come together and reflect on the day that had passed. It was a time for them to connect with each other and to remember the values that had been passed down to them from previous generations. If you enjoyed, and now, as the gas lamps flickered to life, painting pools of amber light on the damp cobblestones, the city began its nightly ritual. People hurried home, their voices echoing in the narrow streets. Shopkeepers closed their stalls, their wares hidden until the next day's eager customers. And inside cozy homes, the evenings settled in like an old friend. For the Victorians, the evening was a cherished time. After a day of work or leisure, it brought a welcome respite. For many, the sun setting meant a pause, a chance to unwind from the day's activities before rest. As darkness fell, it was a signal for change. The workday ended, school let out, and streets emptied as families headed home. The evening became a shared space, a time when workers, employers, children, and parents came together. There was an ebb and flow to this time of day. It was active, but not in the frantic way the midday sun might be. The air grew cooler, drawing people indoors. They gathered around tables, sharing stories and laughter. The evening was a microcosm of Victorian life, full of small joys and duties. Men might have read newspapers aloud, sharing news from around the world. Women could be mending clothes, their needles flashing in the lamplight. Children might do their homework at the table, the quiet scratching of pencils, a gentle sound. Evenings were a time for music, too. A piano might fill the house with notes, teaching children scales or playing lively tunes. Sometimes the evenings were filled with quiet. Families would sit in silence, lost in their thoughts or enjoying the peace after a busy day. Each family had its own rhythm, but all shared the comfort of the evening's quietude. It's hard to imagine this now, but back then, gaslighting wasn't just for the streets. Homes and businesses used gas, too. So, as dusk fell, people would light their lamps and see the rooms glow. This wasn't like your electric lights today. These lamps needed tending, but they did bring a warm glow. They helped people do things like read or write in the evenings, and they made the streets safer because, well, there weren't any streetlights back then. These little flames were all they had, but the evenings weren't always so peaceful. Back in the Victorian times, there wasn't much to do at night. No movies or video games, so people found other ways to have fun. Some might go to parties or dances, but others got into mischief. There were lots of street gangs back then, and they could cause trouble. And then there were the dangers of the night, like robberies or fights. It wasn't easy being out after dark. That's why most folks preferred staying home. they'd eat dinner together and chat about their day. Sometimes they'd play board games or sing songs. For some families, evenings were for chores. They'd mend clothes or clean the house, but even then, they'd do it together. It was a way to bond and help each other out. Evenings were also a time for learning. Back then, there weren't many schools open at night, but some families had their own lessons. Parents taught their kids, and sometimes they'd read books together. They'd talk about what they learned and ask questions. It was a great way to spend time together and learn new things. The evenings were special for different age groups. Kids might play quiet games or read, while adults discussed grown-up topics. Evenings were a time for everyone to relax and enjoy themselves. They'd share stories about their day, eat tasty food, and just hang out together. It was a chance to connect and unwind, which is pretty much how we do it today, isn't it? Life in the Victorian era was all about balance. Work during the day and relaxation by evening. While the day was filled with responsibilities and tasks, the evening brought a sense of calm. People would wind down from their day, engage in leisurely activities, and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Evening was a time for reflection. People would often reminisce about the day's events, discussing them with family or friends. They'd share funny stories, talk about their accomplishments, or simply vent about the challenges they faced. These conversations not only provided an outlet for emotions, but also created a sense of camaraderie and support among the community. The Victorian era was known for its love of nature, and the evening was the perfect time to appreciate it. Gaslights replaced oil lamps, casting a softer, more inviting glow. Homes became sanctuaries with curtains drawn to block out the fading daylight and create a cozy atmosphere. The flicker of candle flames and the soft glow of lamps became a defining feature of evening life. Their warm light not only illuminated the physical space, but also added a sense of comfort and intimacy to conversations and activities. Music was an integral part of evening entertainment. The piano became a popular instrument, filling homes with melodies during the Victorian era. People of all ages would gather around the piano for a variety of purposes. Children learned to play to pass the time or as a means of self-expression. Adults might engage in parlor music, a form of social entertainment where guests would perform and discuss music. During these gatherings, instrumental pieces and vocal solos were common, along with the singing of popular songs and hymns. The evenings were also filled with the aroma of freshly brewed tea. The tradition of afternoon tea originated during the Victorian era, with Queen Victoria's beloved servant, Mrs. Loeb, introducing it as a way to bridge the gap between lunch and dinner. This ritual involved serving tea along with finger sandwiches, pastries, and delicate cakes. It became a symbol of British culture and a beloved part of daily life. As the evening deepened, bedtime approached, and with it, the end of another day. Before retiring, families often engaged in a quiet evening routine. Prayers were a common practice, offering thanks for the day's blessings and seeking solace for the night ahead. This ritual not only provided spiritual closure, but also instilled values and fostered a sense of unity. Then, as the shadows lengthened and the gas lamps flickered, the city slowly began to wind down. People retired to their homes, leaving behind the day's bustle for another day. Within the warm confines of their homes, evenings were filled with a comforting routine, creating a sense of stability and peace. As the Victorian age dawned, It seemed as though the whole world was changing faster than ever before. With groundbreaking inventions and discoveries, rapid urbanization and far-reaching explorations, it was a time of unprecedented progress and transformation. Yet, amidst this whirlwind of change, there existed a comforting constancy, the simple daily life of the common folk, bound by tradition and routine, provided a soothing counterbalance to the era's sweeping advancements. Our slow journey through the Victorian era is coming to a close, and as we reflect on this rich and complex period, let us take a moment to pause and appreciate the quieter aspects of life in that bygone era. While the innovations and historical milestones were indeed remarkable, it was the everyday experiences of ordinary people that truly painted a vivid picture of Victorian life. From the rhythmic routines of factory work to the comforting rituals of the evening, from the joy of simple pleasures like a game of leapfrog or the shared laughter around an evening meal, these everyday moments were the threads that wove the fabric of Victorian society. They offer us a glimpse into a world that seems both familiar and distant, reminding us that even in times of rapid change, the human need for routine, connection, and simple joys remains constant. But now, it's time to step away from the gaslight and the cobblestone streets, to leave the echoes of the past and return to the quiet of our own time. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Victorian era. May the comforting echoes of their daily lives resonate in our memories, and may the spirit of simplicity and unity they embodied inspire us in our own lives today. Until next time, as the old saying goes, keep calm and carry on. Now, if families to come together and reflect on the day that had passed, it was a time for them to connect with each other and to remember the values that had been passed down to them from previous generations. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and joining us for more historical adventures. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. We hope you learned something new and exciting about life during the Victorian era. Remember to stay tuned for more videos and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, keep exploring the past.